My parents are suing me for $5.5 million. They abandoned me at an airport when I was 5 years old, declared me legally dead to collect insurance money, and now they want the inheritance my adoptive father left me. Let me back up. I'm Alexandra Pierce. I'm 34, and I'm sitting at the defense table in a courtroom, holding this red wool scarf that's older than most of my relationships. Across from me, Derek and Patricia are laughing with their lawyer. They're already planning how to spend money that isn't theirs. Money they think they deserve because they gave birth to me 3 decades ago before throwing me away like garbage. They don't recognize me. Not even a little bit. The bailiff calls the room to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Alexandra Pierce. Derek and Patricia stand up, expecting some random judge to walk in. Instead, I stand up with them. I walk past the bar, up those steps, and sit down behind the bench. Their lawyer's face goes white. Patricia's mouth actually falls open. Because the judge they're facing, that's me. The daughter they sold. But before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, you need to know how we got here. You need to know what they did to me when I was 5 years old, and what they did to cash in on it. It was 1994. O'Hare International Airport, Terminal 3. I was 5 years old, wearing this itchy red wool scarf that dragged on the dirty floor. I hated that scarf, but I wouldn't take it off because the automatic doors kept blasting cold air every few seconds. Derek and Patricia were walking ahead of me. Not holding my hand. Just walking fast, checking their watches like they were late for something important. Patricia looked back at me. Keep up, Alexandra. You're slowing us down. They led me past the ticket counters, past all the happy families hugging at the gates, all the way down to the oversized baggage claim. You know that area where they spit out golf clubs and car seats? That's where we stopped. Derek pointed to a metal bench bolted to the floor. Wait here. Watch the bags. We have to go get the tickets. How long? My voice was so small. Patricia didn't even look at me. She was looking at the exit signs. Just count the bags. Count 500 bags. By the time you finish, we'll be back. So I sat down. I pulled the scarf up over my nose and started counting. 1, 2, 3. A set of skis. A guitar case. A box wrapped in tape. 50 bags. 100 bags. The crowd started thinning out. 200. 300. The carousel kept spinning, but fewer people were around. By the time I hit 500, the belt had stopped moving. Everyone else had collected their stuff and left. The light seemed dimmer. That low electrical hum that only empty places have. I sat there gripping my scarf, and I understood something a 5-year-old shouldn't understand. They weren't coming back. The look on their faces when they walked away, that hadn't been stress. It had been relief. They dropped me off at oversized baggage because that's exactly what I was to them. Too heavy. Too burdensome. Something to be checked and never claimed. That's when the silence hit me. Not peaceful quiet, suffocating silence that pressed down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. That silence broke something inside me. It stole my voice. For 4 years after that night, I barely spoke. I just let the world happen around me because I was too afraid to make a sound. It took me 3 decades to learn that silence could be a weapon instead of a wound. I don't know how long I sat there frozen. Eventually, a security guard on a Segway rolled past, did a double take, and circled back. But before he could say anything, a man in a gray suit stepped out from behind a pillar. He'd been standing there for a while, I realized later. Watching. Waiting to see if anyone would come back for me. He was tall, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an accountant, not a hero. She's with me, he told the guard. The guard reached for his radio. I'm calling social services. No, the man said. His voice was soft but cut through everything. He walked over and knelt in front of me. Didn't touch me. Just looked me right in the eyes. My name is Edward, he said. I saw them leave. I'm sorry. He didn't lie to me. He didn't say they were coming back. He told me the truth. And in that moment, he saved me from the lie I was trying to tell myself. Edward stayed with me until the police arrived. He stayed through the foster care placement. And eventually, he stayed for good. He became my dad. The real one. Edward died on a Tuesday morning. Quietly, the way he lived everything. Small service, mostly shelter staff he'd been secretly funding for decades. I sat in the front row wearing that same red scarf, feeling the weight of silence return. He'd been my anchor. The one person who proved I wasn't just luggage left behind. Then came the reading of the will. I expected the house, maybe some savings. Instead, the lawyer handed me a portfolio thick with documents. Turns out Edward wasn't just a retired accountant. He was an angel investor who'd backed 3 of the biggest tech startups in the 90s. He lived simply so he could give generously. The final number was $5,500,000. He left it all to me. The news broke 2 days later. Local judge inherits secret fortune. It took exactly 48 hours for them to find me. Not with a phone call. Not with an email. With a lawsuit. I was served at my home. Fraudulent custody and estate theft. The plaintiffs were Derek and Patricia Pierce. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't ask to meet for coffee. They sued. They claimed Edward had kidnapped me from the airport 30 years ago. They claimed they'd been searching tirelessly for 3 decades, victims of some sophisticated abduction plot. They demanded the full $5.5 million as restitution for their pain and suffering, plus the deed to Edward's house. I sat in my living room reading the complaint. It was a masterpiece of fiction. They described their agony at losing their beloved daughter. The hole in their hearts that never healed. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I went into work mode. I looked at that lawsuit not as a daughter, but as a judge reviewing a case file. And that's when I saw it. The pattern. To normal parents, a child is a person. To Derek and Patricia, I was an asset. When I was 5, I was a liability. A mouth to feed. A burden to drag through an airport. So they liquidated me. Cut their losses. But now, 30 years later, my value had changed. I wasn't a liability anymore. I was an investment that had finally matured. They weren't back because they missed me. They were back because I came with a $5 million price tag. It wasn't love. It was accounting. The audacity of it burned away the last traces of that frightened little girl inside me. They thought they were suing a victim. They didn't realize they were suing the law itself. I put the papers down, walked to my mirror, and looked at myself. I saw the eyes of the child who counted to 500. I saw the woman who'd put criminals behind bars for less than this. I picked up my phone and called the best forensic accountant in the state. I need you to dig, I said. Go back to 1994. Find everything. They wanted a fight. I'd give them a war. I didn't answer the lawsuit right away. I didn't call Derek or Patricia to scream or beg or ask why. That's what a daughter would do. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was building a case. I called Diana Callahan, the most ruthless forensic accountant in Chicago. One instruction, go back to 1994. Find out where they got their money. Because grifters don't change. If they were greedy enough to sue me now, they were greedy enough to have tried profiting off me then. For 3 days, my dining room became a war room. Tax returns, property records, court archives that smelled like dust and mold. Most people think the past is buried. It's not. It's just waiting on microfiche. Deanna found it on a Tuesday night. Alex, she said, her voice flat. Look at 1995. I leaned over her shoulder. There, buried in a stack of digitized court filings from Cook County, was a civil suit. Derek and Patricia Pierce versus American Continental Airlines. They hadn't just walked away from me. They'd sued the airline. I pulled the full case file. My hands were steady, cold, turning pages of my own erasure. The complaint was a work of art. They claimed that on November 6, 1994, they'd entrusted their beloved daughter to an airline agent for an unaccompanied minor flight to visit a sick relative. They claimed the airline was negligent. They claimed I'd wandered off and vanished because staff wasn't watching. It was all lies. There was no ticket. No sick relative. They'd walked me to baggage claim and left me there. But in 1995, without cameras everywhere, without digital tracking, they could spin any story they wanted. They claimed emotional distress. Loss of their precious child. They painted themselves as broken parents whose daughter had been swallowed by the system. And then I saw the settlement agreement. The airline, desperate to avoid bad press about a missing child, had settled out of court. $450,000. In 1995, that was a fortune. Enough to buy a house, 2 cars, and a lifetime of silence. But the check wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the affidavit attached to the settlement. To get the money, Derek and Patricia had to sign a sworn statement. I read the words, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt all the air leave the room. We, the parents, acknowledge that the minor child, Alexandra Pierce, is presumed deceased. We accept this settlement as full and final compensation for the wrongful death and loss of our child. They had signed it. Derek's signature was jagged. Patricia's was neat and loopy. They had legally declared me dead. They looked at a piece of paper that said I didn't exist anymore, and they signed it for a check. They didn't lose me. They sold me. I sat back in my chair. The anger in my gut didn't boil over. It crystallized into something hard and sharp. They'd sold my life for $450,000, spent it all, and now they were back to sell me again. They thought I was a ghost. They thought ghosts couldn't fight back. I picked up the phone. Don't settle. We're going to trial. The trial was theater, and Derek and Patricia were the stars. They took the stand wearing muted colors, grief practiced on their faces. Patricia cried on cue. She talked about the hole in her heart that never healed. She described the agony of not knowing what happened to her baby. She painted a picture of devoted parents victimized by a wealthy predator who stole their child in a busy terminal. It was compelling. If I hadn't lived the truth, I might have believed them. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like victims. Like parents who'd spent 30 years setting a place at the dinner table for a ghost. I watched from the defense table, my face blank. I didn't object. I didn't interrupt. I let them build their monument to grief, brick by lying brick. Because the higher they built it, the harder it would fall. When it was our turn, we didn't call character witnesses. We didn't call experts. We called one name. The defense calls Rachel Pierce. The air left the room. Derek's head snapped toward the gallery doors. Patricia let out a strangled gasp. They hadn't seen this coming. They thought Rachel, the daughter they kept, the daughter they raised, was loyal. Part of the con. Rachel walked down the aisle. She was 28, a social worker with tired eyes and a posture that apologized for existing. She didn't look at our parents. She looked straight at me. It was like looking into a mirror that had aged differently. Same nose, same jawline. But where I'd grown hard, she'd grown heavy. She took the stand, swore the oath, and then she dismantled their lives. Rachel, my attorney asked, what was it like growing up in the Pierce household? Rachel took a breath that shook her entire body. It was like living in a mausoleum, she said quietly. I wasn't just their daughter. I was the replacement. I grew up in the shadow of the tragic lost sister. But it wasn't about missing Alexandra. It was about using her. I'd always assumed Rachel was the lucky one. She got to go home. She got the parents. But as she spoke, I realized I had it backwards. I had escaped. She'd been trapped in the performance for 28 years. They used the story, Rachel continued. Every time rent was late, every time Dad lost money gambling, they'd bring up the tragedy. The church gave them money. Neighbors brought casseroles for years. My sister wasn't a person to them. She was currency. Her absence paid the bills. Patricia stood up, face red. Rachel, stop this. Don't you dare. Sit down, the bailiff barked. Rachel didn't flinch. She reached into her bag and pulled out a shoebox that smelled like mildew. They told everyone they spent every dime searching for her, Rachel said. They told me they hired investigators. They scoured the earth. But when I was cleaning out the attic last week, I found this. She opened the box. It wasn't missing person flyers. It wasn't police correspondence. It was casino receipts. From the Empress Riverboat Casino in Joliet, Rachel said. She held up faded thermal paper. These are dated November 7th, 8th, and 9th, 1994. The week Alexandra disappeared. The courtroom went silent. While the police were looking for her at the airport, Derek and Patricia were gambling. They weren't searching. They were celebrating. The silence was absolute. The same heavy silence I remembered from baggage claim. But this time, it wasn't crushing me. It was crushing them. Rachel looked at our parents, tears finally spilling over. I used to feel guilty that I was the one who got to stay, she whispered. But now I realize Alexandra was the one who got away. I was the one left behind. Derek sank into his chair, a hollow fraud exposed. They hadn't just abandoned one daughter. They devoured the other. My attorney didn't give anyone time to breathe. He walked to the bench and placed a single yellow document in front of the presiding judge. It was a certified copy of the 1995 settlement agreement. Your Honor, he said, cutting through the stunned whispers, the plaintiffs are suing for custody of an estate based on parental rights. However, according to this sworn affidavit signed December 12, 1995, Derek and Patricia Pierce legally declared their daughter, Alexandra Pierce, deceased. Derek's face went ash-gray. Patricia grabbed his arm, fingernails digging into his cheap suit. They knew exactly what that paper was. The receipt for my life. The judge read the document. Her eyes narrowed. She looked from the paper to the plaintiffs. The expression on her face wasn't judicial neutrality anymore. It was disgust. Mr. and Mrs. Pierce, the judge said, voice dangerously low, you accepted $450,000 from American Continental Airlines for the wrongful death of your child. You signed a statement claiming she was gone. So one of two things is true right now. Either you committed grand larceny and fraud in 1995, or you're committing perjury and fraud upon this court today. Which is it? The trap snapped shut. If they admitted I was alive back then, they were felons who'd stolen $500,000. If they stuck to their story that I was dead, they had no standing to sue me now. Because ghosts don't have heirs. Their lawyer physically stepped away from them. Started packing his briefcase. I stood up. I didn't ask permission. I walked around the defense table and stood in the center of the aisle, facing them. For 30 years, I'd been afraid of these people. I'd let their memory haunt every quiet room I entered. But looking at them now, shivering, trapped, small, I realized I wasn't looking at monsters. I was looking at parasites. You sold me, I said. I didn't yell. I used the voice I use when sentencing violent offenders. Cold, flat, final. You didn't just leave me at the airport. You cashed me in. You put a price tag on your own daughter and spent it on blackjack and slot machines. Patricia tried to speak, tears streaming. The same performance she'd used on the church, the neighbors, Rachel. Alexandra, please, she choked out. We were young. We were scared. We loved you. You declared me dead, I interrupted. You signed a paper saying I didn't exist anymore so you could buy a boat. Well, congratulations. You were right. The daughter you had is dead. She died in Terminal 3. I leaned in closer, letting the silence stretch until it was unbearable. A ghost cannot inherit, Derek, but a ghost can haunt you. And I promise I will haunt you with every legal instrument at my disposal until you wish you'd never walked back into my life. The judge banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. Case dismissed with prejudice. Bailiff, escort the plaintiffs into custody. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation into insurance fraud and perjury. Derek and Patricia started screaming as officers moved in. But I didn't watch. I turned my back on them. Just like they'd turned their backs on me. The fallout was absolute. They were indicted 3 weeks later. The local news ran a very different headline now. The parents who sold their child. Their reputation was incinerated. The church cut them off. The neighbors who'd brought casseroles for 30 years demanded explanations they couldn't give. They lost their house to legal fees. They were left with nothing. No money, no status, and no daughters. I didn't keep the $5.5 million. Edward hadn't given it to me to buy a yacht. He'd given it to me to build a safety net. I used the money to launch the Reclaimed Lives Foundation. We provide legal defense for foster children aging out of the system. We make sure that when the state stops caring, someone else steps in. We make sure no child ever has to stand alone in a terminal wondering if they matter. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. Across from me, Rachel is laughing at something I said. She looks different. The weight is gone from her shoulders. She quit her job and came to work for the foundation as our lead social worker. We're building a relationship from scratch, brick by brick, without the rot of our parents' lies between us. I reach for my coffee and my coat sleeve pulls up, revealing the red wool scarf I'm wearing. I don't wear it because I'm cold. I wear it because it looks good. It's not a shield anymore. It's just a scarf. The coffee shop is noisy, full of clattering cups and conversation. But for a moment, I let myself listen to the silence underneath it all. It's not the terrifying, lonely silence of the airport. It's the peaceful silence of a closed case. The silence of a debt finally paid in full. I look at Rachel. I look at the work we're doing. And I realize Edward was right. I wasn't the girl who was left behind. I was the girl who was caught. Thanks for listening, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about second chances, justice, and the families we choose for ourselves. Sometimes the people who find us matter more than the people who lose us.